All right. We are live. It is another Friday Agile for All Ask Me Anything live stream here. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back in Denver, even if it's going to snow today.
Snow again.
Not too much, hopefully, because we have buds on the trees now. And I remember the one year we got a heavy snow after the trees had started blooming, and that was basically the end of green for the year. Because if those freeze and fall off, then you don't get leaves.
No, yeah, that's too bad. Our weather here in sunny Southern California is beautiful as usual. We've actually had a good bit of rain this spring, so everything's nice and green and sunny. So
nice. I'm going to be out there on Monday.
That's right.
So yeah. I'm looking forward to visiting. Hey, I don't want to move back, but I do enjoy visiting.
Nice.
Especially this time of year.
Yeah.
So today we are talking about ongoing growth and development for people associated with Agile teams and organizations. And we're going to talk about our Humanizing Work event, which is something we created specifically for ongoing development beyond the basics. But because not everybody's going to make it to that, and it's limited at 100 people, and we're almost there for the year, I think we can still talk more about where do you go beyond introductory training or book or something like that if you're a Scrum Master, product owner, leader, developer, because that's probably of broader interest. So maybe we start there and work our way back around to humanizing work. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, and I think it might be interesting to talk a little bit about the name of that event. I think that actually applies broadly beyond the event. You want to talk a little bit about the history of that?
Yeah, so the Humanizing Work name was originally my company name when I was solo. Back in 2008, I started Humanizing Work. Bob Hartman started Agile for All as a solo, one-person company, as many consultants do. And then when we decided to join forces into now what's become this bigger Agile for All thing, we kept the Humanizing Work name hanging around and didn't know how we were going to use it. And then it turned into the name for this event. But when I first came up with it, it went back to one of my fundamental beliefs about this Agile stuff, which is that it's not really about software. I mean, there's definitely, Agile software development is a thing, and there are practices that make it work, particularly in that context. But I think it's really just about being human and doing collaborative work on complex problems with other humans, and how do you thrive in that environment. And I find that when you make the work for humans doing complex work, you end up with, in a way, the work helping the people be more fully human, like express more of who they are, or what they uniquely do, thrive more in their work, and it ends up spilling over into other parts of their lives too, which I really enjoy. Some of our clients who have really taken on the values and principles of Agile at work find that carries over into other parts of their lives, and they are in a way more fully human. I mean, of course, you're always you are 100% human kind of ontologically. Your expression of that can change, things get in the way and stifle that, and people experience that as frustration and demotivation at work, and in other parts of their life, broken relationships and ineffectiveness. And as we align work with people, we end up with people flourishing more.
Yeah, I really like that. I kind of like one of the articles that Steve Denning has written, where he talks a little bit about how Agile is kind of a management discovery. And it happened to be discovered by software developers. And
I love that our discoveries by the wrong people.
Yeah, and God bless them, right? Because they were trying to solve more complex problems than a lot of industries were. And so they discovered this approach to management of work that was more human, that, as Ron Jeffrey says, kept developers' lives sane and safe, and protected them from some of the more dehumanizing parts of management. But maybe they weren't the best people to discover it as far as spreading the word beyond software development. So yeah, it's interesting. I was actually having a conversation with the leadership development coach yesterday, where he talked about his purpose about helping really evolve the state of work and the state of humanity as complexity grows in the world. That brings with it a tremendous amount of abundance, but it also brings with it the need for a different way to manage.
Okay. So, okay, let's talk about the Humanizing Work event. I was going to come back to that later, but now that we've talked about the theme and where the name comes from, so a little bit of the backstory. In, I guess it was 2014, maybe late 2013, back when Agile for All was just me, Bob, and Angie, our operations wizard, or makes all the stuff happen behind the scenes. We had experienced kind of frustration in two different directions. One was that we were doing a lot of introductory classes, like Certified Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Product Owner, Agile for Teams, because people recognize a need for learning in the beginning. And so we could do a lot of those. And they're good to get people started, but they get people started, and that's about it. And maybe we can talk more about what to expect from those courses versus other things later. So there was that. We wanted to offer something more. And these advanced Scrum Master and advanced Product Owner courses we're offering this year are kind of formal example to that, but we were thinking about that 5 years ago. And then we also had kind of a frustration when we tried to teach more advanced topics at conferences. We noticed that we would get a bunch of people in the room, and things we would sort of take for granted with one of our classes that everybody would know wouldn't be the case in that room. And we'd end up in one of these like, wait a minute, you actually have to do a sprint review to be doing Scrum? or we haven't done a retrospective for years. I didn't know those were important. And you're trying to do maybe an advanced retrospective kind of session, and it goes back to the basics, and then you run out of time. And add to that we were seeing good results from the brain-friendly learning approach we do at that point, and noticed that most conferences we went to were really just lecture after lecture. The structure was built on that. So Bob and I said, what if we could do kind of rethink conferences with all the brain-friendly approach for an entire conference and make it just advanced content for people we knew had already been in one of our intro classes. And that would somehow make it possible to see this increased human flourishing among our clients, because we could go deeper and get to things beyond the basics. So we ended up doing this Humanizing Work event, inviting a bunch of our friends like you, Peter. So I think you were involved in certainly the second one.
I think it was the second one. I think 2015 was the first year that I attended. Yeah.
And so the first one, I think we had, I think Jake was there. I think we had a few others who are now on the team, who were just kind of friends of Agile for All at the time. And let's produce a program that builds on what we teach in our intro classes and help people be more effective. And it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, if I think back to that first event that I attended, I was working for Adobe at the time, and Richard and Bob invited me in to come in and give maybe one or two presentations, if I remember correctly. And I was immediately struck by the sense of family among the attendees. People knew each other. It felt like a family-friendly. We all know each other. We all love each other. We all are here to support each other event. And so, as powerful as the presentations were, and the discussions that were going on in those presentations, even more powerful for me was kind of the feeling I got from the event that there's something special about the alumni of Agile for All, especially the ones that end up making it to the Humanizing Work. And for me, that's just been amplified year after year as we go into now what will be my fourth? I can't remember now either.
This will be 5 overall, I think.
Yeah.
We did 2 in Denver, and this will be the 3rd up in Beaver Creek.
Right.
Yeah, and that moved from Denver to Beaver Creek. So for those who aren't aware of this, we did the event the first 2 times in downtown Denver, which is a great place to have an event. And the venue we used, especially for the second one, the Four Seasons, was amazing. But being in a fairly lively city like Denver, evening would come around, people would go out to dinner, and they tended to go in groups with the people that they came with. which was good for colleagues catching up and applying or kind of processing what they learned. But it didn't build that sense of community as much. And so we thought, what if we get to a place where it feels more like you're getting away from a normal conference, normal work? And so we ended up at the Park Hyatt Resort in Beaver Creek, which is up in the mountains, a couple hours from Denver. And there's not a whole lot else there, which for some could be a downside. For this, it's fantastic because it means sessions are over for the day and people go sit around the fire pit and grab one of the s'mores kits the hotel provides and get a drink and sit there and get to know each other and build connections that weren't happening when we were in the city. And
Yeah, that Beaver
talk about is this retreat kind of thing.
Yeah, that Beaver Creek Resort is just absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth I've ever been to, and that certainly amps up the feeling of community and family there. And I mean,
people don't realize how great Colorado is in the summer.
Yeah,
everybody comes out here to ski.
Right.
And winter is the busy time, and then in the summer it's super quiet up there, and it's actually more beautiful, and there's more to do.
Yeah,
which is amazing. Gorgeous. Including some winter things. Like they still have outdoor ice skating in Beaver Creek in the winter, which is kind of
right.
In the summer rather, which is insane, but fun.
And that shift to Beaver Creek kind of coincided with a little bit of a rebrand of the event too, from a conference to an advanced training event, right? Because really this is advanced training. And I think a key component of it is not just the training sessions that we're offering during the day. It's also the peer coaching that's going on, right? One of my favorite events is kind of some of the show and tell that we do, where people bring in at least one thing that they're doing well at their company, and they put together some posters and they do their own training for the rest of the group. It's short, right? But they get to do their own show and tell. You hear some of the coolest stories and people getting really emotional about the changes that they've made in their organizations, and showing the power that it has when we start to humanize the way we look at work.
Yeah, and I've noticed a dynamic with that particular session that we've run the last few years, where people are in the weeds every day. They only know their own environment most of the time. And so it seems like it's all a mess. And then they get together with different people and they find out, yeah, we're struggling with this thing, but we're thriving at the thing that this other company is struggling with. And we can tell that story.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not just useful for the people hearing it, but the people telling the story realize how far they've come and how much they've actually accomplished. And they go back encouraged based on that. So it's not just knowing new things, which can kind of be overwhelming sometimes, where you come back with 50 things you want to change. Sometimes they come back with just increased confidence that they have been able to grow and achieve quite a bit, which is great.
Yeah, it reminds me, we've started doing these little events in the evening when we're doing some training classes, some of our public classes and things like that. We've run an experiment or two on this with getting local alumni together. So one example of that is I was doing some public classes in Scottsdale, Arizona. And so Angie and Ashton, who's our marketing guru, and Angie, who's our operations wizard. I like those titles. I think we should. Came down and we went to the beautiful Scottsdale Princess Resort right next to where the Phoenix Open is played. And we had 8 or 10 local folks. We invited them to come and have some of our Agile cocktails or the Agile mocktails is what I partook of. And one of the comments from somebody that attended, she actually was not, I guess she was a fresh alumni. She had gone to day one of that training class, and we invited folks from the class to attend as well. She was able to come, and we spent, I think we had scheduled it for an hour, and about 2 hours into it, we were all still there chatting and having great conversations. One of the people that had come from the class made this really cool comment. She said, "This is so great. I don't have to climb the mountain alone anymore," because she realized she had kind of brothers and sisters in arms, so to speak, in this challenge, right? And so we call those our Agile adventures, kind of a local recreation at the micro of what we do at the Humanizing Work event in the summer.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that has surprised me is as we've tried to build community among our clients, our alumni, I expected to kind of remain at the middle of that in some way. Like we would get people together. And now I hear all these stories of people calling each other. I get the reports from the Humanizing Work Slack community. Almost no public messages out there. And I start worrying, well, maybe people aren't engaging with this. And then I get the report every week, and it's like, this week you had 400 direct messages.
Yeah.
And this week you had 350 direct messages. So people are interacting with each other and helping each other out without having to have us in the middle.
Right.
It's amazing.
That's great. Yeah.
I wish I could see some of it because I kind of want to be in the middle. I want to be part of it. I don't want to be that shouldn't have to pass through me. I shouldn't have to tell these different people's stories for them. But I would like to know what's going on.
Right. You want to, along with Tony Robbins, say, I am not your guru, but I would love to be your friend and know what's going on.
Yeah.
So we had a question on Facebook here, Richard, from Ritin Sharma. She asks, my question, what is the first thing a Scrum Master should do while starting a new project?
Learn Scrum.
Yeah.
So
beyond that, assuming somebody knows a little bit about Scrum, and I've been in this situation before, right? Yeah. We're spinning up a new project at work. Maybe we want to use Scrum on that, and I'm the Scrum Master. And what do I do with these folks, and how do I get started?
Yeah, I think most people do too much at the start of a project. So we used to talk about things like a sprint zero, which I no longer recommend. And that was like spend a period of time getting all the things ready. Mm-hmm. And what I found is to get going with a new Scrum team, you need a team. You need a place to work and some basic tools. And you need the top of a backlog. That's it. Right? So figure out what you're going to do first and then go do it. So I was working with a team at Whole Foods a couple months ago now. Not so much starting, but they were kind of resetting, or they hadn't really been working as a team. They'd been a bunch of individuals who did meetings together, worked separate things, and they wanted to say, let's really be a Scrum team. And so we did a workshop to figure out what that would mean. And they ultimately decided we're going to spend the next 2 weeks running one-day sprints. So instead of waiting 2 weeks to hear what's working and adjust, every morning we're going to get together and plan something small we can deliver, maybe a couple things, and we're going to go work on it. And then at the end of the day, we're going to reflect. And then tomorrow we'll do it again. And that's become one of my favorite ways to get started because you get so many iterations so fast. Have you tried that?
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know if you've ever read Diana Larson's book, Lift Off. And she has some nice things about getting the team ready to be a team, because there is the backlog side of it, and there is the kind of the tooling and infrastructure side of starting on a new effort. But the team side of it is pretty important as well. And how do you get the team working well together and starting to know each other and talking about how we want to work together as a team? That I think probably even more critical than some of the tools and infrastructure parts. I think if you can get people beginning that early stages of team formation and starting to move through those quickly, then all of the other questions become easier and easier to answer.
So my experience with that is like doing the work together. Yeah. And actually having a shared goal and reflecting on it builds a team. What does Diana recommend to accelerate that?
So those are part of it. And a lot of that is also about team chartering and how we do working agreements and those kind of things. And I'll say that, I've had good and bad experiences with things like a team charter. The bad experiences have usually been when we just needed to write some things down on a whiteboard and move on. And it didn't actually spur discussions that led to vulnerability and talking about how we're going to address real challenges. When it felt like, oh, everybody's going to be nice to each other. And, it just felt kind of surface level. Those weren't very good experiences. It felt like a waste of time. But when we can talk about things like the thing that we're trying to create in our team is a different culture than what we're used to in this organization. And that's going to present challenges. And how are we going to support each other as we go through those challenges? What are we going to do if, these types of things start to happen in the organization, which we've all seen before, how are we going to address those things? And then we can agree on how we're going to support each other to make cultural change. Those have been really powerful sessions, and they start to create some trust on the team, the early stages of it.
What do you think about emerging one of those out of the set of mini sprints rather than trying to do it prospectively up front?
Well, I think if you're doing one-day sprints and actually having little mini retros day to day, you could do that. I would say if it's not explicit that part of these mini sprints is about building the team, then it's very possible that could go by the wayside, and we focus the retrospectives on the tools and the infrastructure again.
Yeah, I just wonder that I think sometimes when we're facilitating these chartering or working agreements or team alliances or whatever the model is,
right?
It seems like as coaches, we go into it with a little more knowledge about the kinds of things people will run into than a new team has.
Yeah.
And so if you ask them to come up with one, it may not get to those real discussions because they don't know what kind of new challenges are going to emerge when they actually try to collaborate on something in a short sprint. And so I wonder if it might be better to have little increments of that experience and then reflect on it in a structured way. And when this happens next time, or when this happens bigger, how do we want to be with it? How do we want to handle it?
Yeah, I really like that as one of the mini retros. We've been doing this for a week now. This is our fifth day trying this. Now we know a little bit about how things are going to go. How do we want to work together when these types of challenges arise?
So this gives me an idea for a resource we could add to our long backlog, which is maybe build a guide to those first 2 weeks and structure the retros more.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Wait, for those of you who don't know me and Peter well, one thing that we're really good at is coming up with things to start. So we have to be disciplined about not pursuing all those squirrels.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we're working on as a team is relying on those members of our team who are great at finishing and pairing up with them more often. Yeah, totally.
All right, so I think we've answered that one, and I think that brings us to a topic I wanted to hit, which was the ongoing growth and development. And let's start with Scrum Masters, since we've been talking about with Ritten's question, what should a new Scrum Master do? So somebody's been through a CSM class, they've gotten started. Where would you expect them to need to grow some more skills, some more capabilities, and how might they go about that other than humanizing work?
Right. I think probably the first new skill set a Scrum Master needs to learn about is around coaching and maybe facilitation. It kind of depends on what their background is. But the world of professional coaching has a lot to teach about how we make teams great teams. Some folks come into the Scrum Master role having some good experience with being good facilitators. Those would be the two areas I think that are immediately come to mind for me, where I've seen new Scrum Masters struggle. Either they don't have the confidence or the personality to really take over and facilitate a meeting, an event, a conversation. They're not good at framing the meeting. They're not good at feeling like they are the leader, even though they're not the one making the decisions. They don't have that skill set around facilitation, or they don't have much background or understanding of what coaching really is. And I think the professional coaching world has a lot to offer there about what it means to actually coach, and other areas of coaching knowledge as well. Even thinking of how coaches in a sport go about their work.
Yeah, I've found what I've learned in working with my bike coach and my vocal coach almost more useful in my Agile coaching than what I picked up from the professional coaching communities. And I think the big difference there is a really good sports coach like Lee McCormick, the guy that I work with, who you've met, Peter, on the biking stuff. He's a good coach in the professional coaching sense of helping me discover my goals and grow into those and find capabilities I already have. But I've noticed a thread among many professional coaches, many people in that community, kind of taking that to an extreme where the coach really doesn't bring any expertise to the table beyond the coaching expertise.
Right.
And I appreciate that someone like Lee brings a lot of knowledge about his discipline and models that work, and is not afraid to give me a tool at the right time.
Yeah.
And then also build my capability and let me see what I have. And that balance, I think, is really relevant for Agile coaches. And there's definitely exceptions in sports and exceptions in professional coaching. But having worked with a few people now who have that in other disciplines, I've found that really powerful. And like a Scrum Master is really helping a team towards a particular set of goals. There are some well-known tools and things. And so coaching involves more than just asking some good reflective questions and using free tools.
I think the capability to ask those good reflective questions and to really listen deeply are skills that the coaching world, the professional coaching world, brings to the table. And I think you're right that since those are new skills for some people, they can start to feel like that's the only thing that they can do now. Well, I can't tell anybody an idea about how this might work because I'm the neutral coach or the neutral facilitator here. And one of the things that we talk about for example, in some of the leadership courses that we offer is, a set of competencies that includes professional coaching, but being able to dance around that floor of competencies where we have professional coaching skills, but we also have mentoring skills and training skills and a deep domain expertise in how these Agile frameworks work and what tools might work. And the real great skill of a coach is knowing when to step into one of those skill levels.
Yeah. I think the professional coaching world does themselves and coaching a disservice by calling only one of those things coaching.
Right.
I found it, Doug Silsby's model that he teaches in the book, The Mindful Coach, I've found really useful because he'll talk through these 7 different things, some of which carry content, some of which are really about asking questions, and a variety of things within those. It's all coaching. And the whole thing is coaching. And I think it removes that kind of fear a new coach will have that, oh, did I just stop coaching?
Yeah.
Something else that's not coaching, rather than I'm taking a different role as the coach in this moment, and I should know why I chose that and recognize when it's time to switch to a different role, but it's all a part of the coaching.
Yeah, I think that this then points me to now thinking again about that idea of humanizing work, which is the skill that actually makes all of that stuff possible is around personal development. So my own self-awareness of my tendency to go too strong in one of those skill areas, and the ability to step back even in a situation that might be loaded with some kind of emotion for me personally or for the team, the skill to be able to step back and reflect and say, in this situation, which of those skills would be most helpful to this team right now? And if we're locked into our own, personal issues and our own biases, and those are really running us instead of us running the show, then the thing that gets me excited is like, it's all about the development now. So what does a Scrum Master need to do to re-answer your question? The Scrum Master needs to get aware somehow of what their own personal biases and personal challenges are in working with others. And this is why, Richard, we have this experience so often, which is that we will be teaching about Agile or coaching or leadership. And it turns out that, yes, it has a huge impact at work, but it also has a huge impact at home, because the skills that you need in order to do this well at work transfer immediately into the home.
Yeah, you're the same person, and the life of a family, for example, or a nonprofit organization you volunteer with, I think those are just as complex as the work situation, and you're still you. And yeah, that kind of mindful competency, awareness of where you go when you're under stress, and making that something you can choose, so powerful for any role. And I think that is kind of the common skill in good coaches or facilitators. Whether you're working one-on-one with somebody or in a small group, or you're facilitating a big 100-person retrospective for the year or something like that, that being in the moment and also kind of sitting outside yourself, watching what's happening and making decisions about what you do. And that's a common skill across all great coaches and facilitators I've seen.
Yeah, in all venues. Again, if you even think of great coaches in the sports world, you think of for example, Phil Jackson was usually referred to by his players as the Zen master, because he just didn't get rattled. He had that composure and was able to, he would have their stories of him talking to Kobe Bryant, and Kobe Bryant would get called into the office, one of the great basketball players of all time, and expect to talk about basketball. And, Phil Jackson would hand him a book on meditation. And he'd say, what does this have to do with how my jump shot is going right now? No, it's actually about your life skills, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you need that self-awareness and mindfulness combined with a good toolbox.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have choices to make, you can be aware this meeting is going off the rails and I have no idea what to do.
And if you're the Zen master, you say, and whatever happens will happen. Whereas if you have some skills to say, and I think I'm going to try this tool because I think that might bring things back in, that's probably even a better outcome for the team.
Yeah, for other people, certainly. You might be at peace with your meeting falling apart, but the other participants have trusted you with their autonomy over the next hour, so you should probably use it well.
That would probably be a better outcome.
So a tool that I frequently recommend, and I have it here, easy to grab, the Art of Focused Conversation is my single favorite facilitation tool. And it has turned out to be a good coaching tool as well, because the whole back of this book is examples of good sequences of questions to help a group discover something and make a decision. And getting familiar with what good questions sound like. It's combined with Silsby's chapter on good questions. Then you can look at some of the powerful questions examples. You can look in other resources and you can see, that's where that question would fit. I could use that, and it becomes part of your toolbox because you have a model to integrate it into.
I think that's a great starting point for a new Scrum Master, actually, is to go check out Focused Conversation and check out that model and start learning some of those questions. And then also to check out some of the books on coaching. So we recommended The Mindful Coach, or is it Mindful Coaching? I can't remember now.
I think it's The Mindful Coach.
The Mindful Coach by Silsby. Lisa Adkins' book has a great book on this that talks about the competency model and some of the professional coaching skills that we can add to the toolbox of those other competencies. So that's Lisa Adkins' Coaching Agile Teams.
That perspective that coaching is just the kind of content-free one, and mentoring and training and facilitation are her other words in her model. So I like combining the two.
Exactly.
She has a lot of stuff that's great for the Agile context.
Mm-hmm.
And then I find Silsby's overall model more useful for my own mindfulness and my coaching.
Yeah. So those are some go-to resources that we rely on or have relied on and have kind of integrated into how we approach these things.
Yeah. And if you get out on the Agile for All website and search for facilitation or coaching, we blog about this stuff so much that you'll find a lot of resources there. And I end up teaching about this a lot. I know you do too. If I look at the Humanizing Work 2018 program, there's a whole track for Scrum Masters and coaches that is packed with a lot of the stuff we talked about. My session at the Global Scrum Gathering in Minneapolis in a couple weeks is on facilitation skills, where we've got our Leading Amazing Teams course. We've got our the Cal course that you teach, Certified Agile Leader, has a lot of the self-awareness stuff, more leader-oriented.
Yeah.
Our advanced CSM course that's coming out later this year focuses on this. So we've really built a lot of this learning into the progression beyond CSM.
So we've got a nice shout out from Ethan Allen here on the page. Ethan says, hi, Ethan, and also to Kevin. And I know that we're streaming to a few different areas here. So if you're not happen to be on the site that Ethan's on, Ethan says, I would say that Humanizing Work is the best conference, workshop, seminar, etc. I've ever been to. Prescription of the sessions, the hands-on application, and philosophy of leadership is amazing. I participated multiple years and look forward to attending again soon. And we will echo that. We look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, we missed you last year, Ethan. So
yeah.
Come back this year.
But we appreciate that. Yes, it's good to hear that our experience of it is mirroring yours, Ethan.
Yeah. Ethan went to the Agile Adventures thing in Scottsdale too, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah. It's great to see him there. So a pioneer in many ways.
All right, so we talked about Scrum Masters. Let's talk about ongoing development for product owners next.
Great.
So
this happens to be both one of Richard and my areas of passion. Richard and I have been working together to build out our advanced CSPO offering, and so we've kind of been in this mind space a little bit over the last week. And one of the things that we do at Humanizing Work pretty regularly is that as we discover new things with clients or through our reading and studying, we get a chance at Humanizing Work to kind of share that there first. And so often we will have sessions at Humanizing Work that maybe we've used with a single client, and now we want to share these with other clients. Or, this is something that we're excited about, and we haven't had a chance to use it with the client because it hasn't been right for that client yet. And so we get to share it at the Humanizing Work conference. And so I think of a lot of the tools that I now use all of the time, I first shared at Humanizing Work. So that's one of the exciting things about Humanizing Work for me.
Yeah. So in terms of content, in the initial class, Certified Scrum Product Owner class that you and I teach, somebody gets to the end of that and they can kind of take an idea, a charter, a request that's come from somebody else, and turn that into a really good backlog to help a team go in the right direction with good alignment and get feedback quickly. For the kind of next step, and so what we're focusing on in the advanced CSPO as well as in the product owner track at Humanizing Work, it starts being more about how do I figure out even what we should be doing, like thinking about things like business models and using tools like the lean canvas, like some of the value modeling tools that we teach, thinking about more complex relationships with stakeholders and bringing in feedback more effectively. So the role kind of changes from getting a team going in the right direction for a known need to discovering the right thing for a team to do and experimenting to figure out what that is.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing that often we try to compartmentalize product ownership into this very kind of business entrepreneur focused thing where it's all about discovering the right thing and describing it well. And, as Richard and I use in our definition, I think I stole this definition from Richard, learning and expressing what to build for whom and why, right? And yet a critical part of that whole role is about leadership as well. So if we bring it back to the theme here, product owners are absolutely going to pick up tools about discovery and developing deeper empathy for a customer segment and the problems that they have and the jobs they're trying to get done. And a big part of being successful in both discovering that as well as expressing it and seeing it realized in the product itself is a leadership skill. How do I collaborate with all these different stakeholders? And I don't know any, at least in the Scrum world, I don't know of any role that has a broader set of stakeholders that they need to be intimately familiar with and successfully working with to be successful. That's another leadership skill right there.
Right. And we've developed a tool around this that we're calling the stakeholder map that we started just as kind of an aside to solve a problem for one of our clients. And now we're teaching it at Humanizing Work this year, building it into the advanced CSPO, because we realized just figuring out who the stakeholders are and how they influence you and how often you need to interact with them is itself something that requires some work.
That's right.
And then you have all the interactions on top of that, and things like stakeholders coming to you with conflicting goals.
Mm-hmm.
And an immature product owner is often driven by the last conversation or the loudest voice or the most powerful person they talk with. And I think part of developing leadership in this area is being able to take all that input and kind of hold it out, and they're back to the not being subject to it, but making it an object that you can look at, which we talk about a lot in leadership, and deciding what you're going to do about that. And sometimes it's thank you and no, or we're not going to incorporate that in now, or yes, and here's when it's going to happen. But
right. Yeah, that seems critical. So we're excited to bring some of these tools around product ownership as well.
And Angelo asks about certification. So follow up on that. So at past Humanizing Work events, certain combinations of sessions have led to certain certifications, because we found that we're covering the same content as we do in some of our more advanced courses. And to answer his question specifically about the new Scrum Alliance Advanced CSM and CSPO, we're trying to figure that out right now. Working on, can we get approval for making Humanizing Work part of the program that leads to those, or maybe all of the program that leads to one of those. And so that is one of our goals. Certainly the product owner track looks very much like what we're doing with our ACSPO program.
Right.
So TBD, but it's something we're working on, Angelo. And others are kind of driving the other tracks. So I don't know what the plan is over there, but certainly with the product owner one, Peter and I are working on that.
Yeah.
For our actual kind of public ACSPO program, we're looking at doing something different than we normally do.
You ready to reveal that right now, Richard, live on the live stream?
Well, are you?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah,
we're still talking with the Scrum Alliance to get the specific program approved. And so this is not a final thing yet, but we started experimenting a bit with, well, let me explain why first and get to the what later. We love these in-person classes we do. Like I did a 2-day CSPO this week with a group in Raleigh, North Carolina this week. And it was a fairly small one with 9 people, but they were amazing. Like the interactions that happened in that room, I think there's some people that are going to stay in touch afterwards. And I saw little bits of what we see at Humanizing Work in that. But there's a big challenge with that sort of thing where 2 days of content is a lot. And it's hard to use all of that for a while. So you end up trying to find the one thing that really matters after drinking from the fire hose for 2 days, and then holding on to the rest and remembering it when you need it.
And I think if I could interrupt, Richard, like there's pretty good research on the effectiveness of in-person training, of any kind of training. And some of that research is fairly discouraging, which is it rarely lasts. And sometimes they call that a 30-day washout is associated, right? Like you get excited about something for 30 days, but 30 days after that, even with really good training, a lot of that information is going to be lost, right? You're just not going to be able to immediately apply it. And to toot our own horns, I think we do a great job of doing brain-friendly training. So it's more absorbed than a traditional approach to training. Even that, because it's so much information in 2 days, it's really hard to be able to apply it in a systematic way.
Yeah. So for the ACSPO class, we said to ourselves, what we've reached that point in the. It's a good thing there's 2 of us, because it's first when I talk to myself. We thought, what if we could chunk it up and teach a couple of these tools and then give people time to practice and come back and share what they learned and teach another one. And then we thought, well, there's no way we can do that in person, because we can't fly somewhere for a 2-hour session and then fly back and spend enough time flying. Don't want to do that, and it's not cost effective. But we'd had some experiences with tools like Zoom recently where we were able to mimic and in some cases improve on the in-person experience with a virtual session. And so we're thinking about running this as a series of probably 6 90-minute Zoom sessions with homework in between that'll take an hour or 2, and then come back and reflect on it. And so you end up with still 2.5 days of work, but now it's spread over 6 weeks with real application in the middle.
Yeah.
We're pretty fired up about this. We've don't know if it's going to get approved yet. So we can't sell it, but
I would say that I had one experience with doing something similar. So one of the, anytime there's an innovation, it's combinatory. So one of the things that this is combining is an experience that I had with a leadership team in the early days of my own leadership development program that led to the CAL eventually, where I would go once a month and work with a CEO and his team and then give them homework. And we would have a 2-week follow-up call. And that team made such tremendous progress over the course of those few months because there was some feedback loops involved, right? We talk in Agile all the time about doing a small chunk of thing, getting some feedback, right? Small chunk of work, get a little feedback, now do the next thing. And to be able to incorporate that into a training program is really exciting for me. I've seen it work. That was an in-person instance of that. That happened to be a local client where no flying was required. But being able to build that into just a standard offering is really exciting for me. So, think of each of these little, 90-minute Zoom-based sessions as a quick sprint with some homework that you go off and do based on the content that we learned that week. And then on the next week's call, the first thing we do is review the homework. So you get an inspect and adapt loop built into the training itself. That's pretty exciting for me.
Yeah, I'm also excited about being able to pull together a widespread group.
Yeah.
National or maybe international, depending on if time zones
work
out for people. Because that's one of the things that's great about humanizing work, that we're getting a pretty diverse group of people that have self-selected for an intense learning experience. And I could see the same thing happening here with people all over the country or wider jumping in and really helping each other learn more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So as we do, we have a lot to talk about. And once we start talking, it keeps going. We haven't talked about ongoing development for leaders. And I know this is a passion of yours.
Absolutely. So, well, we have touched a little bit about how that influences these other roles, right? But specifically for people who
you got a manager or director, VP, somebody like this that is in an Agile organization, maybe gets the basics, but recognizes this is demanding different things of them.
Right.
Where do they go?
And so this is one of the more exciting things about the developments in the Scrum Alliance community with the introduction of the CAL program. As we built out that program, it was really to address that exact segment that Richard just mentioned. Leaders that maybe they're not involved with Scrum teams directly anymore. They have Scrum teams maybe reporting up through the hierarchy to them in some way, or they're really interested in the output of those teams and the outcomes from those teams. But they aren't on it. They don't need the Scrum Master tools. They don't need a product owner's tools. They need to know, what does an organization look like that is using Scrum? What do I bring to the table now? So what do I contribute? And how do I contribute? And boy, this is so critical. My experience over and over and over again is that we can get things working at the team level pretty well. We know how to do that. I would say that is one of the Agile core competencies. It's great at that. How do those teams interact? What structures work? What policies work? And then for the leader themselves, what do I need to do as a leader? What kind of awareness do I need? What kind of skills do I need in order to lead effectively an organization full of these types of teams? And so that's really has been the focus of the CAL program for me. And we have sometimes is a little confusing for folks because we offer 2 types of a CAL at Agile for All. And the way that as Jake and Trish and I have talked about the differences and how we describe those, one way to think of it is a different zoom level for a camera, right? We know that we need to be able to do effective team leadership. And so at Humanizing Work, we will have some of the sessions about that. How do I lead a team at any level in the organization, including if I am the leader of the executive team? How do I create an amazing high-performing team at any level is the Zoom level for what we call the Leading Amazing Teams CAL, the LAT. And then the one that I work on is a zoom out. We're going to zoom there. We zoom out and look organizationally what structures and policies and cultural things are we trying to do to talk about the interaction between teams. So if we think of LAT as a zoom in and the traditional CAL as a zoom out of that, Those are things that we're bringing sessions from those courses and new ideas as well, just like we were talking about with the product owner role, that are both about, again, that's kind of that's the structures and team things, but it's also, again, comes back to me as a leader. What do I need to do in order for my own personal development here? And how do I get feedback as a leader? I saw this great quote yesterday that I've now did a little research on. It's attributed to Ken Blanchard. And he said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. I was like, oh, that's a great quote, because how do you get feedback on your own leader? It's actually a big challenge for CEOs, because everybody wants to make you happy. So it's really hard to get feedback. And so what are some tools to get feedback and to start growing your own capability as a leader?
I've seen the participant list so far for Humanizing Work 2018, and there are several CEOs and VPs on the list, some of whom have done this really well.
Yeah.
People like Linda Barnes at Geonetric. And I'm really excited about the way that I know they dive in on the new topics and provide lots of stories and lots of connections for other people who are there. So the event with that leadership track as well ends up being not just for people who are working at the team level in a Scrum Master or product owner role, but people who are working on leadership teams and trying to make a team of executives in some ways, and who are thinking about those kind of zoomed out organizational concerns for Agile. And all those things come up from real experience, not just theory.
Right. Yeah. So I realize now, after I concluded my statement there, Richard, you queued me up to just talk for a while on a thing I'm really passionate about. So
there's one session on, so it was going to be on the leadership track, and I was so excited about it that when I put the program together, I moved it to, I think, the day 2 opening session with everybody. And I think you know which one I'm talking about. It's the immunity map one.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Good. So immunity mapping is a tool that comes from a psychologist at Harvard, a guy named Robert Keegan. And immunity maps are something that I had read about in my studies. One of the things that I love to do is go out and find examples of organizations that are doing stuff that just seems cuckoo crazy to most, if you were to look at it from a lens of a normal, this is what a company looks like. One of the books that I found about that is called An Everyone Culture by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy. And as I read through that book, they were talking about some of these organizations that are just fascinating. An example from that book is Bridgewater, right? Bridgewater, which is the best, most successful hedge fund in the world. And they do things in a pretty radical way. At any rate, in the middle of that book, Keegan starts to talk about some of the challenges with personal change and personal growth and development. And then he introduces this model that he has developed and used successfully in a lot of different ways called immunity mapping. The core concept there is that there are really 2 types of change. There are technical challenges, and then there are adaptive challenges. Technical challenges, we can meet those challenges just by getting new knowledge. I just need to know how to do it, and then I can do it. And a great example that he uses is that for some people, losing weight is a technical challenge. If you just give them a program, then they will make the change. That's not most people. For most people, losing weight is an adaptive challenge, because just having the book or the diet plan isn't enough for them to actually successfully make the change. And so he gets into the psychology.
Yeah. If anything related to like diet, technical problem for her.
Yeah.
So easy for her to have discipline around that. For me, right. Not so much.
Not a technical challenge for you or for me, right? And so then it's an adaptive challenge. And he gets into some of the neuroscience and the psychology of why our brains are built to not make that change. And he has just a beautiful tool. I love it when you can take something that's as complex and difficult and frustrating as the human brain, and he maps it out into a very simple tool that helps us start to peer underneath what's going on underneath our psychology there, and what am I actually committed to that is preventing me from making this change and I'm not aware of. So he gets into what he calls hidden competing commitments. And this tool is fantastic about that. So the very first time I read about it, I said, okay, physician, heal thyself. Let me try it out. And I had one of the most powerful changes I've ever experienced in my life around this. And it had to do with, the challenge that I was trying to address, that I decided to put as input to this tool, was kind of a feeling like I was stretched too thin in too many areas. And I expected that the outcome of that would be, more clarity of priority or something like that. And as I got through it, I'll just share what came out the other end of it. I'm not going to give you all the messy middle of it. I realized that I had completely self-identified as musician. Like a huge hidden competing commitment for me was, I value my capability to create music, and then some things that I could challenge, some assumptions that I could challenge around that, which is, if I weren't playing music regularly professionally, would I feel less valuable as a human being? And so one of the things that spits out on the other end are small experiments. Keegan recommends them to be safe to fail experiments, right? To test those assumptions. Well, I'm not a safe to fail kind of guy, Richard. For me personally, I have a very high tolerance for risk and change. And so I decided to do a pretty radical experiment, which is to say, I'm just going to say no to every gig and see how I feel.
Did you put a time limit on that?
I don't even remember now. For a month, maybe? I don't remember what it was.
For a month. I remember
for a month.
About that last year.
I'm just going to say no to every gig and see how I feel. And holy cow. The very first time I turned down a gig, it was a spine tingling experience. The hairs on my arms stood up, on the back of my neck stood up. And I was like, oh, I don't feel bad. In fact, I feel great. Huh. Then I'll tell you the failure version of that experiment. I got a call to play in Paul Anka's band. Paul Anka, pretty well-known musician. And the band that I would have been playing with is the top tier, like one of the best trumpet players in the world from New York was going to be on it. I was going to be playing second trumpet with him. And I faltered. I said, oh yeah, I got to do this one, right? And as soon as I hung up the phone, I felt horrible. And so I said, I called back. I found a better sub. I got somebody else to play it. And as soon as I hung up the phone that time, I felt great again. And so to me, it was just a fascinating experience, powerful experience with this very simple tool. So we're excited to share a little bit about immunity mapping. One of our colleagues, Henry, has gone off and gotten training from directly from Keegan. And so Henry is going to be helping out with that session. We'll look forward to it.
So we're actually going to do one with the participants there. Our participants will do their own. We'll start working on that.
And we don't get to tell them what change to make. They get to self-select. No need to do anything radical like the crazy Peter Green.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask now, it's been a year and I don't think I've talked with you more about this one.
Yeah.
Have you found a more sustainable place for music in your life now?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was, I had to have that experience, and now I'm selective about what times I play. If it's going to be a really great situation for me and I'm not feeling kind of underwater or anywhere else, I'll absolutely say yes to playing. And so I'm still, in fact, one of my sessions at the Scrum Gathering in Minneapolis is going to be the Jazz and Agile session again,
which is fantastic.
Yeah. So I absolutely still play. I just play much less. And one of my concerns was that if I didn't play frequently, my skill level would go down. For whatever reason, maybe I'm just old enough now. I've found actually that my playing has been better since doing that.
Yeah. Well, we are coming up on the hour, which may be the longest one of these we've ever done. And people watching probably have other meetings to go to. So we've mentioned a lot of resources in here, but I just want to emphasize, if you're watching this as an Agile for All alumnus, is that the singular? Somebody who's been in one of our... if you've been in CSM, CSPO, Agile for Teams, Cal, LAT, one of those courses with any of us, you are eligible for Humanizing Work. And if you get in one of those between now and late June, you are eligible. And if that's you, I'd encourage you to go to humanizingwork.com, have a look at the program, think about what difference those skills and ideas and connecting with those people would make in your life and work. And I think we've got a handful of spots left. This one's actually going to sell out, I think. So if that interests you, get on it right away. It is my favorite work week of the year. A lot of people say the same. Just encourage you to check it out if you're at all eligible for it.
Ditto.
All right. And so I think with that, we're going to wrap it up. You can, of course, follow up with more questions on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, our website. We love to hear from you, and it informs the kinds of things we talk about in the next one of these and what we blog about and what we teach. So
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.